Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I too welcome the opportunity to speak on such a vital issue, and I thank the honourable member for securing this adjournment debate. Many of the issues that I want to raise have already been done, so I'll try my best not to repeat them. And I would also like to thank the Minister for his attendance. The flooding of the 27th of June affected many residents of East Belfast, many of whom had never experienced flooding in their properties before. And this is an indication of the severity of the weather conditions that evening. But unfortunately, I fear that we will experience more and more similar downpours in the future. That evening, when I saw the water levels in my own back garden, which doesn't normally flood, I knew that this was having a major impact on my constituents. I located my husband's wellies and out I went to try and see if I could be of assistance. Only a few streets away in the Tullycorna area, I was faced with residents who were knee-deep in water, desperately trying to unblock drains to let the water get away. Mr Newton mentioned the cleaning of the gullies, and I have asked Road Service if they have a plan of the areas that are more susceptible to flooding, so that when heavy rain is forecast, an additional clean can be carried out in these areas, in addition to the annual cleaning schedule, and I'm awaiting a response on that. I also found other residents trying desperately to get through the floodline to get assistance. In an emergency such as this, people's primary concern is obtaining an urgent response. And as others have said, to wait on hold for a considerable length of time before being told that it was in fact a different number they needed to ring is simply unacceptable. Constituents continually say there's confusion between the different statutory bodies dealing with flooding, and better communication between the agencies is essential in times of emergency. When the rain stopped, there were many householders who were actually fortunate enough that the water hadn't got into their properties, although the levels were right up to their front doors. We asked if some of those roads could be closed until the water had drained away, but unfortunately the PSNI refused to do this. It was extremely frustrating then when cars drove down these streets, sending waves of water into houses that until that point had actually remained dry. And this is a situation that could so easily have been prevented. Another preventative measure that could have been taken was to do with the distribution of sandbags in advance of homes being flooded. Many residents were again told that sandbags could only be provided once a home was flooded. And indeed, sandbags were given out in some areas where the flood levels were so high that the sandbags would provide no defence. In fact, if those sandbags had been distributed to the areas where the flooding wasn't as severe, it could have at least prevented some homes from being flooded instead of none. While sandbags themselves have their limitations, for example, many elderly people are unable to move them, the issue of consistency and provision across council areas must also be addressed. Many constituents do not see their council boundary, rather they simply see someone in the next street being given sandbags and overnight assistance, whilst they are not because of their address. We also can't deny the impact of development and the increasing incidences of flooding that we are seeing in urban areas such as East Belfast. While I understand that the Planning Service do aim to consult with the relevant agencies where possible for larger developments, the fact that no single body is responsible for flooding and flood prevention can make matters more difficult. There was severe flooding on the Gilnahirk Road, much of it seemingly due to garden-grabbing developments that have impacted on river flow in the area. The cumulative impact of small developments, extensions and even concreting and paving also causes problems, and perhaps rate subsidies for more permeable surfaces, for example, could be one way of encouraging people to actually consider the impact of drainage in their area. There was also confusion and some miscommunication about the flood payments in some areas. Some residents believed that they weren't entitled to them as it was only for those who didn't have insurance. Now, while the £1,000 payments were welcome and many constituents did rely on them, I do feel I need to raise the matter of reactionary payments being paid in contrast to substantial investment in our infrastructure. I understand that people are naturally frustrated with the authorities, and perhaps the last thing they would wish to consider is paying more given the poor level of service, but we simply cannot continue to talk about how we should react better to or contain disasters each time a crisis occurs. Whether it was the big freeze and thaw of December 2010 or these floods, we must act now to reduce the risk of repeat and improve also the information and crisis response services that were lacking in June. Thank you.
Chris Little.